stream I've seen Restream, there's like a countdown, 3, 2, 1, bam. And so
Now
here,
you're on.
it's you're on. It's like it's on three. It's like Lethal Weapon thing. Is it on three or is it three and with Restream it's three and here it's just bam. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. My guest at this time as we count down to episode 1000, Kristopher Morron.
1,000, man. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Oh yeah, no, this is 961, man. 961.
That's wild.
I know. I know. It is what it is. So long story short, I came back to Calgary to reconnect with people, reconnect with people. I think I've mentioned this last time we were on. Didn't work out the way I imagined it would, and I don't regret it.
Yeah.
Are you there?
I'm here. Oh no, I'm frozen.
You're frozen. Yeah.
Man, that's just the worst. And now I've got the spinning beach ball of death, of doom. It's just
so, if it wasn't for bad luck, you'd have no luck at all.
Oh jeez. Oh boy.
Can you still
hear me?
I can hear you. I hear you.
Let me see if I can like.
Oh, there you go. There you go. You're back. You're back. You're back. You're back. I changed the 861 to 961, and boom, you're back. Okay. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. So long story short, I didn't connect the way I hoped to, but at the same time, it's been a lesson process, and I have some hard rules about people, and what I find is maybe I'm being a little bit of a prick about this, but I have like a 12th rule now. I have 12 rules now. The 12th rule is wait for no one. It might sound like a little harsh, but what I realize is if people want to, they find ways. If they don't, they won't. It's really that simple.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. Relationships are complicated things, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly going through a good amount of that these days, so I get it.
Oh yeah.
So, all right. So you're moving on from Calgary, and you're approaching 1,000 episodes. So here's the important question, though. Last time we spoke, we had discussed the possibility of a Just Joshing Roadshow, and I want to know, is that still in the works?
So I'm going to show you something right now. It's already technically started.
I love it.
So this is what I did, and you can go check this out. You can check this out yourself. Oh shit! I misspelled that. Trained professional right here. Right. Hey, yeah, but I didn't get the idea of this anyway. So what I've done, and there we come on you. There we go. So I'm gonna show this to the world.
There we go.
Here.
All right.
Yeah, so right now, I'll just do the advertisement right now. For just a low price of $5 a month, you can watch these shows that are already started. I've already got 2 up there. Actress Barb Sim was my first guest. While I'm in Calgary, anybody I interview in Calgary, I'm actually taking a video camera to. I'm recording it in a location, and they're all in different places.
Nice.
And I'm interviewing people, and I'm doing it. It's a 1-hour show, basically. It's going to be an hour, like specifically for people watching and listening. But what it is, like I said, is I'm meeting people in their place. I'm producing, writing, and directing this myself. And again, they're all over the place. Like the next one. So the first one was in a house. Second one was in a Second Cup in Calgary. The third one's in a pinball bar. Right.
Nice.
The fourth one is in a vegan restaurant. The fifth one, hold on, let me think. Let's see if I get these all in order here. The fifth one is, if I'm not mistaken, in another house. Right. There's 2 of them in 2 different other houses, and there's another one in a steakhouse in Okotoks, Alberta. So I've already left the city technically once.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that is what I'm doing, folks. I'm already kind of just making the show, and I'm figuring it out now as I go because, and that's just it. Like you said, you can see the new intros. I'm trying different intros out, different outros out, and that's the whole secret to it is I'm creating that world now. It's already been more successful than last time when I first tried doing Patreon a few years ago. it failed miserably. This has already got 3. Oh no, it failed. But I realized the issue too is I didn't have a good offer. This is a much simpler offer for people to understand. You want to support the show, you can just give me $1. If you want, just to watch the podcast episodes right before anybody else, you give me $5. If you want to do the whole enchilada, there's a $20 tier, which also include like work like stories that are works in progress. And then there's $100 tier if you want to sponsor the show, like big time, big sponsor. So it's like it's really simple,
awesome.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's it. And so now just about getting the word out and spreading the word out, but also this is my learning curve. So you get anyone that joins it now can kind of get this like you're seeing me figure this shit out as I go.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's awesome. Well, good for you, and it's exciting. I know we have distance between our conversations, so it's fun to like revisit what we talked about last time and see, you're making actionable progress towards doing the things you've been planning. That's really exciting. I'm excited for you.
Yeah. So now comes the U.S. citizenship, getting my driver's license, which I'm getting in the States because God bless America for all your lack of rules in some places. Hey, listen, it is what it is.
It is what it is. That's a thing. It's true.
Right. Listen, you got to take advantage of the game. I mean, I have an address I can use in the States, my grandmother's house if need be. I can also and also depending on where you are in the system, you can also just get a PO box and just call that your address. You're a strange country. That's all I've got to say is you're a strange.
You're not wrong in that regard. Yeah, we are a strange country. That is for sure.
Yeah. So there's that. I've been working on my novel. I've been drawing more stuff. I've been pursuing this, making this a living thing. I regularly make okay money. Like this month, I mean, I made like my first living wage as a freelancer, and I don't know what next month's going to look like so far, but I've guaranteed myself already $1,000, and I haven't. It's halfway through the earlier month. I'm trying to get some more work this month or next month, and even this month still, because that's just how this goes. When I'm done with you, I got a couple jobs I'm going to be doing afterwards. So it's just it doesn't stop.
Welcome to the gig economy, right? Just get the
gig. Yeah. Well, that's it. I actually enjoy it. It's freeing in a great way because you don't have to be anywhere you don't want to. It's that simple.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing to have a job where you are excited about all the things that you do, every day, every month, and there's always a little bit of, are we gonna make it this month? But when you do, it feels really good.
It's gonna have its ups and downs, but I'm actually so there's a point in this where it's like, this is gonna sound like cocky to people who've never done this, is can you make money at will?
Mm-hmm.
And I've started to hit that stride. Now next month is interesting because my side gig is at a very low minimal. So it's an experimental month. I'm selling my comics anyway, so it's not like I'm not gonna have money come in. I have like a lot of old books and stuff like that. Even if I don't get full top dollar value for them, I'm still gonna walk away with some change, right? Sure. So that's my next couple months. Basically, it's the last thing I have to do that actually requires me to be in an apartment here. Right? If I have to stay longer than planned and I got nowhere to go, I can sleep at a Sally Ann for a month. It's not. And people would go, well, that's terrible. It's like, no, it's not. It's just I'm in that position where I really don't need much. So why would I why go for things that make no sense to go for?
Right.
Am I crazy, or does that actually make total sense?
Well, actually, I was going to ask you a slightly related question. I'm curious, like, why? I think some people watching this would be like, dude, why are you taking all these chances? And I guess my question to you is, with the novel and the work, and then the new episodes of Just Joshing that you're working on, the new format, why do you do this?
Because it bothers me if I didn't. I remember, so for me, I remember in this life that I had this crush on this high school girl. And when I was in high school, and her name was Shannon Campbell. And I never asked her out. I am 41 years old. That still bothers me.
Yeah.
Right? That still bothers me. Other things, no. That like my mistakes never bother me. My failures don't bother me. My regrets do. So you're here once. You're not walking away from it. Safety is at best an illusion. Security is also at best an illusion. So if there's no safety, there's no security, you're not walking away. The only question left is, what do you want to do? That again, it's not exactly the quote unquote American dream, because again, I don't care about I don't care about the house. If I cared about the house, the car, the kids, the wife, all that shit, I'd have it all already. All right. And to sound a little bit like an arrogant prick, it would be bigger than most people's houses. And right, just because of the day, right? It just because if it's what I really wanted, it'd be what I'd really go for. I'm not saying I don't want some of those things. I would love to have a relationship in a place that kind of feels like home, but that's the other aspect of it as well. I have lived so many lives in a short time that I don't know. Like, I may not live a normal life again, but I also think we're at an interesting age where there is no standard. It can be whatever you want it to be. So if that's the case, what do you want your world to look like?
Yeah, I think you're onto two things there. The first is, I think in general, the way that people work and the way that jobs are defined is COVID changed that. Like, it just, right. More people working from home, more people are leaving jobs that they're not satisfied with. They're just, like, not willing to put up with, well, I've got this 9 to 5 to pay the rent, to pay the mortgage, to, car payment, all that kind of stuff. They want something more out of what they do professionally. And I think the other thing that I'm curious to talk to you about is, since I made my big move from being a teacher to now being an orchestra conductor and still creating, the thing that really pushed me to make that big change and to take that chance of leaving the full-time job that had benefits and retirement and all that stuff was, I didn't feel like I was being true to who I am. And so you talked about, like, you would feel strange if you weren't doing that stuff, and I think that kind of speaks to who you are, as like the core of who you are.
Well, okay, so I remember, I am old enough. Me and you are really close to the same age, if I'm not mistaken. So you remember the late 80s when you were a kid, your grandparents retired. Did you look at your grandparents after they retired?
Did I look at them?
Did you really look at them and their lifestyles and stuff? A lot of them were exhausted, right? Especially after when they got to the end of the journey. Because again, and by the way, I'm not knocking any decision anybody made. Everybody did the best they could in the time they had with the knowledge they gave. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is people have a tendency to at the time, the thing was, you stick it out, you're going to get that guarantee. Well, my dad couldn't get one of those regular jobs, so he had to figure out how to improvise. That was part of it. I got to watch what retirement did to people I know. I didn't notice that they were any happier. In fact, some of them were more miserable than people with nothing. So it didn't guarantee those things. And also, I mean, I literally watched in the last, like you were talking about, like working from home being since the pandemic. I would argue even before then, because again, what became very clear to me as I became an adult was, I'm not going to retire. Like that, and it's being proven more and more true. The retirement age keeps getting moved up and up and up and up and up. So what that tells you is that these jobs aren't paying or protecting you like they did, and to a point that there are generations of kids that have never seen this dream of retirement. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, I have for a long time felt like my goal wasn't to get to retirement. It was to have a career that would allow me to make music as long as I'm physically and mentally capable of doing that.
Yeah.
And now it's, extended to just being able to be creative. mostly because I just can't imagine not wanting to create or not wanting to make music at any point in my life. I mean, I look at people like John Williams, who's well into his 70s, and he is still producing incredible music. Why stop? You know, Duke Ellington was writing in on like while he was in the hospital on his deathbed, he was still writing music. Like, and I don't think he was doing that because he had to. I think he was doing that because that
Oh,
was who he is, you know?
well, there's a point too, right? Okay, so again, retirement doesn't really exist. Anyone that's listening to this and going to me, well, I'll retire. Good for you. But it's not what it looks like. The American dream of I'm going to be able to enjoy my life. I mean, why are you waiting till retirement? Why not start now? These
Mhm.
guys, it's not just musicians, are people that have found their passion, whatever that is. They're working in some ways harder, in some ways easier than a day job.
Mm.
I have odd hours. I sleep weird schedules. I don't live a normal, whatever you might call it. But at the same time, I'm doing what I love. Look, I get to talk to you. I get paid for it. Like, I mean, honest to God, right?
Yeah.
I get paid for this. And, I go through the ups and downs. I mean, I get paid either directly, either through like, the Patreon or through some
Mhm.
other means, or indirectly, I through my advertising services because I create content so that people can be aware of products and projects, right?
Mhm.
So I'm doing this both ways.
Mhm.
So why then would I or anybody else for that matter, um, you know, if I'm doing that, I have the choice between that and going into a place that don't get me wrong, like my side, I still work a side gig. I work at a hockey arena but think about that job, right? It's not because I necessarily need the job exactly anymore. I mean, I kind of did when I started, but it's far less of a need than it was. It's
Mm.
fun,
Yeah.
but it's not forever either, and I know that too, right? When my time is up, I mean, okay, I got contracts in Calgary going into next year, so I might keep it like kind of like as a side, legitimately when I'm in town doing shit. If there's something going on, I might work it just for shits and giggles. I
Mhm.
enjoy it, but it's not going to be the same schedule I worked last time
Right.
because I'm not going to be here as much. So
Mhm.
why would I do that? I mean, there is one chance I stay in the arena, and I'm pitching a show literally today, actually, for one of their junior hockey teams because I think there's a marketing opportunity there that they're sleeping on,
Mm.
and they have the staff to do it. So why not just make some content to target, I think, what your correct audience is going to be for this,
Yeah.
and see what happens. And I'm thinking like a businessman, like I'm thinking like an advertiser. I'm not thinking like again, I don't think like an employee anymore. I
Mhm.
think about like I just look at the opportunities in front of me and going, can I utilize them? And I'm not expecting a yes. I expect a hard no, right? But that's okay. I mean, I'm going to be once the pitch is in, I worry about what's next, and I worry about what's next, and I worry about what's next. Eventually, I'm going to get yeses,
Right.
and and that's how I look at it. Like it's out there, and the more I do this, the more out there, and the more I'm going to get more yeses. I have that much confidence in myself, and that's where I'm at. Like that's where you need to be. Um, Freelancing is very much a mindset. It is
Mm.
such a mindset that it's game, and once you understand it, right, you can make money doing it. It's not impossible, but you got to be aware of. Again, this going back to the music thing. He's a musician. But there's different kinds of musician too. There's the one that performs on stage. There's ones that make commercial jingles. There's ones that do like lots of background music in video games. None of that, by the way, is bad. I think all of it's cool. But I mean, you find yourself going into a niche, and in that niche, are you serving people and are you serving yourself? And if you're doing
Mhm.
what you love, right, you're never gonna feel like again, you might be working your whole life, but guess what? You're not gonna give a shit
Mhm.
because you're doing something you really enjoy doing. And that's the real secret. And also if you play your cards right, which I mean, this is the other aspect what I'm working on now is that whole passive income thing. If you
Yeah.
play your cards right, guess what? You don't have to do this forever either. You can switch to other things. And that's the beautiful thing about life. But you have to create your future. And I think that's something today that's more prevalent and more honest now than it ever was. Back in when we were kids, companies created the future. All right, and it promised a future for their employees. That is no longer the case.
Right.
If you want security of any kind, you got to build it yourself.
Man, you said a lot. There's a lot of unpackaged there.
Does that all make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense to me, and I would say that I wholeheartedly agree. I think what I learned about it myself in the last we're coming on 2 years now that I left the job with the retirement and all that. What I learned is that first of all, find the opportunity to be happy with what you do professionally really does a lot to change one's perspective. It certainly changed my perspective about things. Secondly, if you don't put yourself out there, and if you're not comfortable taking some no's and continuing to go, you're never going to get to that point where you find the thing that does bring you so much satisfaction. I mean, it is a journey. Journeys don't happen overnight. It's a process of doing something, putting it out there, doing something else, going and taking chances and getting lots of no's or getting denied, because you if you don't do those things, how could you ever expect? It's like hitting the lottery. You're just hoping that the right thing's going to cross your path. Whereas if you work and you are constantly pushing yourself to put yourself out there and to search for opportunities, you're going to eventually hit that opportunity that makes the big difference in your life. And I think that's really common amongst people. I've talked to a lot of folks who, that whether it's afraid to record themselves singing and put it out there, or afraid to self-publish a comic book and put it out there, or afraid to audition for an orchestra because they don't think that they're good enough. This idea of like, I'm not good enough is crazy, because we should just, if it brings you joy and it's something that you're passionate about, or it feels like it's a core part of who is it, it's not anybody else's business. You should just do it. And if you are comfortable with doing those things and putting yourself out there, eventually you'll find the right people to start a band with, or will publish your comic book, or will, whatever, an orchestra that will invite you to join. But if you're too afraid, none of that stuff will happen.
Well, okay, so drawing. It took me about a year into the pandemic before I started drawing, and my biggest fear was that I was going to suck. And then I had this wonderful epiphany about in November that year. So what if I suck?
Mm-hmm.
So what? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all, and that is liberating. Because, right? So, you have to be aware. You have to be aware when you're doing this kind of thing that it's like you said, it's a process, sure, but it's also about what you want to get out of it. Like some of the things I don't do them necessarily for money. My illustration stuff, right? I don't necessarily do it for money. I do it because it's my place to be bad on purpose, right? You need that as a creative. When I write, I am doing things to get paid. That's a slightly different pressure. So you can't now. I don't let myself get into my head too much when it comes to trying to be good. I find that's far more devastating to a creative than just being afraid to suck. That's that's a personal thing for me. I realize that if I keep putting content out there, my quality is going to go up by default. Right? I don't have to worry about it being great. And the big comparison to that is J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Right? Tolkien, I mean, to his credit, wrote some incredible masterpieces, but Lewis produced more work, and I would argue as many masterpieces. And the difference between them was Lewis just wrote, and Tolkien would struggle and toil and again, I'm not. Hey, listen, Lord of the Rings is awesome. The Hobbit's amazing. But I also look at Narnia, look at the Out of the Silent Planet trilogy. I'm looking at Mere Christianity, right? Lewis accomplished a ton of stuff in the time he had, and I have to think that his fearlessness was a big part of that.
Mm. I agree, and would add to that I think Tolkien actually did produce a lot, but Tolkien was really interested in world building. I mean, cultures and languages and
Oh, sure.
histories. And when you look, let's compare Middle Earth to Narnia. When you look at Middle Earth, the depth of the cultures and the depth of the characters is built upon histories of information that Tolkien created to support all of that. And and it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just where Tolkien's priorities lied as opposed to C.S. Lewis, who was like, this is the story I'm telling. This world that I've created is based on mythologies that people know already, but it's a vehicle for telling the story I want to tell. Tolkien
Absolutely.
was like, I want to tell a story, but I also want to build this world. I want to build all
Oh,
this history, you know?
there's again, I'm not criticizing the approach very much, because it's
Yeah.
like, hey, like I said, who am I to question Lord of the Rings? Like, seriously,
Course, yeah.
right,
I mean,
right,
yeah.
right. But I mean, but I look at the content output, right, the overall output. I'm like, there is something to what of the two approaches, I prefer Lewis,
Mm, mm-hmm,
because it's just, you put yourself out there
mm,
and let what happens happens. You're gonna get, like I said, that fearlessness of, I'm just gonna be out there and I don't give a shit,
mm.
is, I admire that a lot, right? And I think that's something that um like I said, I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan. There's a little bit of that as well. I'm not gonna
I
lie.
wish you could have been a fly on the bar stool when those two were hanging out and talking about each other's
Oh,
writing.
absolutely. No, absolutely. No, it's one of those. It's one of those, like, wow moments, right? So, it's one of those moments where you look at it like they both shaped culture in ways you'll never. C.S. Lewis was one of my inspirations during the pandemic,
Mm,
because when uh, when Britain was being bombed, he was on the radio speaking to the masses, and he was doing it in on the BBC, and he was doing what would become mere Christianity during one of the most difficult times in England's history.
mm,
And on one hand, I was like, this is the most absurd thing ever. Who's going to care about a story? But on the other hand, it was the best thing anyone could do, because if there's any example of life going on in spite of whatever's going on in front of you, it's that art of, even in those moments, going forward. And I
mm.
really, so when everybody else was figuring out what to do, I had already started putting my novel out as an audiobook on my show,
Yeah.
because it was like, you know what, it's the right thing to do. It's because, yeah, I'm saying life goes on, and
Mm,
that's a beautiful statement in of itself, no matter what.
yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting to. My grandmother grew up in Oxford, and so she was in Oxford at the time of World War II, hearing the planes fly over and stuff. And my imagination goes back to that time quite a bit. Is to like, and we all know that World War One affected Tolkien's writing, and it just I wonder how that changes a person's perspective when you're living through something so scary and so terrifying. And then you're a writer, so like, how does that affect your writing? You know?
Well, we kind of have that knowledge. I mean, a little bit. I
Yeah.
mean, the the thing is, when you come face to face with your mortality, like, no matter what it looks like, it could be a disease, it could be a war, it could be, you see how, like, North America, in one very real sense, is sheltered,
Mm,
right? We have serious stuff goes on, like poverty, especially in the United States, but I can't even say just the United States anymore. There's a lot more homeless people in Calgary than I've ever seen in my
mm,
life. It is brutal here in a way that I don't think people realize, fully grasp here. Um, it's brutal, but even so, like, comparatively to, like, other places, right? We're still gentle.
mm,
Even in the United States, even though you have some of your neighborhoods could legitimately be third world countries in of themselves, right? You have the we're not in an African country being bombed by some superpower for money. Um, we're not worried about where we're going to be tomorrow or the next day. But even in all that, like we all come face to face with our mortality sooner or later, and who are we in those moments? That I think is a more telling thing for us all. Um, like I said, I on a personal level, like I kind of came face to face with my own mortality when I was like 28 years old, right? And it changed me. I'm very time conscious, right? Maybe to a point where it's a huge fault of mine. It's a bit of a fault, but I'm time conscious because I am aware how precious this while really is.
Yeah.
Because it can end tomorrow, and I don't have the, and especially as I keep getting older, my patience slips further and further away the longer I go, because I want to, again, part of it, I just want to enjoy it for as long as I can with the people I really care about. But the other part of it is I realize like this is it. Like, again, not to be morbid, but I mean, because I'm planning on hanging out with you in person while I'm on this trip at some point. But even so, between now and then, who knows what could happen?
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Who knows? So this is important because it's happening now. Right? It's important. And it's how I try to treat everything, because it is important. If you don't treat it like it's important, then what's going to happen is you're going to find yourself in a situation sooner or later where it's gone. Right? And then what?
Yeah.
Right? You're going to regret it. And again, it's another regret I don't want. That's why in one sense, I don't regret coming back here at all. I tried. Like a lot of people I cared about, I tried. And that's all I can do. I can only control what I can control, but I can look in the mirror and said I did everything I could with the people I really wanted to see and care about. Whatever their response was, their response was, but I tried. That's all any of us can do at the end of the day. Right?
Yeah, and I think that you obviously also we can't control other people's reactions.
Totally. No.
So you can only like go put yourself out there and do what you feel like. If you're going something with the best of intentions and the other party, is resisting that. What are you gonna do?
Well, that's it. It is what it is. I've hit that point in my life where it's like, okay, like I care far less if it's a yes or a no. I'm more worried about you wasting my time. Again, I've become more time conscious as I've gotten older, and because I realize, and ironically, the more time conscious I become, the more money I make. It's weird how that worked out. That's it. Like that's where I'm at. Like what my mortality taught me was I am here for a set time.
Yeah.
And I don't take it for granted.
Right.
And I think going to your original question, that's the biggest thing I think everybody takes from these moments. I mean, you can let things scare you. You can let, I mean, fear is perfectly normal reaction. But the question I think that really comes up is, okay, during the pandemic, and I think this is a question maybe now that we're going to say about a year removed from it now. Being afraid is perfectly normal. But how did you let your fear treat other people? No matter what they saw, what they said, like how did that impact you? Was it healthy? Was it not healthy? I think that's the real question more than anything else. In times of when it's really hard, in times when it can be life or death, it always is kind of life or death. I think that's the real secret, right? Who are you? Does that make sense?
It's really interesting to hear you talk about that, because I was just talking with my students about this a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the tragedies that we've been dealing with in the United States of all these young kids who made innocent mistakes and ended up getting shot, whether that's going up to the wrong door or pulling in the wrong driveway and getting in the wrong car.
Yep.
And I work with high school kids. I conduct a high school orchestra, and we're checking in with them. We want to make sure that they're okay. These are scary things for them. And I think the point I tried to make with them as we were having this discussion was a lot of these folks are holding on to fear. And so they're afraid that someone's coming on their property to do them harm, or they're afraid that I don't know. And so they're taking that step of purchasing a weapon to defend themselves and I think that's a reaction to their fear. And then what happens is that we have these tragedies happen. And what I told my students is that we shouldn't aspire we shouldn't live our lives in fear. There's so much outside of our control that if we were constantly focusing on what we're afraid of, we would just never leave our house. We would just barricade ourselves into a door, and we would never take any chances, and that's not any way to live life. Conversely, I think that it's important that we live life from a perspective of love and respect. And I think that it doesn't mean that like it's going to create this utopia that you live in, but it's a choice that allows you to look at the world from a perspective of opportunity, optimism, and what I found is that when I'm in that headspace, really magical things happen. Whether it's meeting random people, having new experiences, and then that for me is it perpetuates. So I want more experiences like that, and I wonder, well, if this happened, what's the next thing that could happen? And to me, that has led to a more fulfilling and interesting life. And I tell my high school students all the time, like, but that wouldn't happen if I was afraid. That happens because I'm putting myself out there and I'm exploring. And as I'm doing that, you had mentioned this earlier, I'm trying to provide a service for others and lift other people up.
Yeah.
Because when we do that, also magical things happen. And I think that's what my books are about. I think that's what my music is about. I think that's who I am on the podium when I'm teaching students or when I'm conducting students. And I really believe, like, again, going back to earlier conversation, like that's just who I am. It's who I've been for most of my life. And it feels like I'm being true to myself if I'm trying to be that positive force in other people's lives.
So, okay, your gun problem is, I kind of feel like it's Pandora's box. I don't know how you put it back in. Like I'm just being very honest with that. I have no good answer. A lot of the ideas, like a lot of the ideas that are put out there, I feel like are half measures. At the same time, just real quick, I can't blame anyone that wants to buy a gun in the United States. Just after the last few years, I can't blame anybody. At the same time, and I don't know if anyone needs a freaking AR rifle. I think that's a bit overkill. But then again, like I said, to each their own there. Watching what happens there, my whole take is I think we go after the wrong people. My theory there is if we really want to stop this, we should go after the gun companies, not the people that with guns, but the gun companies themselves. Because because I think there are far less gun companies than there are guns. And I think if there's ever going to be anybody incentivized to deal with that problem, you make the people that make them responsible. That has been my perspective for a while. I don't think there's any other way to do it. And until people make that decision honestly, I don't know if anything will be done. That's my soapbox there on it. I don't have a good solution either way. I really don't. I understand why people buy them. I understand why people are repulsed by them. I see both sides of that argument. I don't have a good solution. I just don't. I think right. I just don't.
I think the thing that scares me the most is that I think guns themselves aren't necessarily the problem. I think what we have a problem with in this country is dialogue and being able to have conversations with people with opposing points of view without in a respectful and in a mutual way. I think, and I've seen it just too much, where people overreact, or they are not willing to consider somebody else's perspective, or they just lack the communication skills, like basic communication skills, and so they react in physical ways. And, listen, I was middle school, high school teacher. We had fights all the time, and that's because kids didn't have the words to talk through those problems. I watched those situations escalate over and over and over again, and it's just like missed opportunity. Missed opportunity. There was a chance to get out of it. There was a chance to walk away. There was a chance to be a better person, and they just don't know how to do that. And I think if we're gonna really solve the big problem here, it's we need to learn how to live with each other in a respectful way. That is an ambitious thing, but ultimately, I think a lot of our problems just come from that.
I agree. I don't think we have enough podcast time to have it go. No, because honestly, I'm a touch more. I think I'm a little bit more mistrusting of authority, I think, than you are. And I think, to me, I had this talk with DJ Butler. I'll just say this real quick. I asked myself a legitimate question: why are there only two parties in your country?
And then that question all the time,
right? But I had an answer, and it's not a nice answer, and I don't want to be too, like, again, it doesn't really matter which side you're on. I don't. It's irrelevant to me. But what I realize is what has happened now is we live in a world today where there's no. When we were kids, there was a consensus, a consensus, right, wrong, or indifferent. There was a consensus kind of how the world was, and everybody kind of compromised to that consensus to some degree. That's gone. Right, that has eroded in the time we've been alive. So now what's happened is, since there is no honesty or transparency from any aspect of government anymore, people are going to the next best thing, which is whatever tribal affiliation fits them best, good, bad, or indifferent. That's where I think it goes, and I think it's that way because it's an easier world to understand. Right, we're right. We have this particular feeling. This is the way it is. We're right. Doesn't matter, again, what your affiliation is. Okay, right? So instead of having like this nuanced conversation about, okay, I lean slightly to the right, but there are things on the left I really like education, healthcare, like LGBTQ, like human rights in general, right? Which I think is something both sides agree on. Just a little bit on how it's a little different, but again, there are nuanced things, right? On the flip side, but the thing is, if I'm really extreme and you're really extreme, we're never going to talk to each other, which means that it's easier to manipulate us. Again, I'm a little bit more distrusting of authority than I think you are, and that's fine. I think that's good that there's different perspectives than my own. But the way I see it is, it's beneficial to people in power that if we're at each other's throats, we're not going to fix anything. And the status quo will maintain as is. Maybe I'm a touch cynical. But
I want to make one point clear first, that I don't know that I really trust authority all that much, to be honest with you.
That's fair.
There's been quite a bit in this country that leads me to be very, very suspicious. But I guess my comments were more intended towards like your community, your people, where you live. I live on a wonderful street where neighbors have actually made an effort to get to know each other and look out for each other,
which is awesome.
And it's a dream, because you can wave to people and you can, like, if we had a chair stolen from our front lawn last summer, and like this, our neighbor came up and he's like, "Oh, I noticed the car pull up and I wasn't thinking, and I'm so sorry, and I should have, been
That's
more
cool.
proactive." Just the fact that he talked about that to me was like, that's amazing that you're, supportive in that way, and that you're conscious of what's going on in your neighborhood. And that's the kind of connection I'm talking about. Like, we don't have to agree on everything,
and
but
we should.
but we have at least the ability to communicate in a way that is respectful and truly listen and consider somebody else's perspective, because that is powerful, and that is
Absolutely.
not happening as much as it should
No,
in the world,
I just think at this point it's by design a little bit to some degree, and it's designed. We live in a world I think designed for that. But your community sounds great. So, like I said, that this could be a full podcast. I don't think either of us want to fully go down. So right. But
Right.
I will say, like, I agree with you. Like, honestly, I would go so far as to say I won't want a world where I want people to see everything the way I see it.
No, that would be boring.
Not only would it be boring, it would be like it would be depressing.
Mm.
Like it would legitimately be depressing. I am much more interested in a world where you have your own ideas of how things work. I have my own ideas of how things work, and we don't have to agree on all of
Right.
them. Still have a beer with you afterwards. It's like,
That's
okay, right?
Yeah.
It's like I will, let's agree to disagree. Okay, let's agree to disagree. Want a beer? Sure. Okay, cool. Let's go grab a beer. Let's talk about some like fun stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, because we're more alike as human beings are more alike than they are ever different.
Mm.
And I think I think as long as that was true, and I think that's always going to be true on some level, then there's always hope to make friends, right?
Mm.
And we are in a world today. I mean, okay, think about this. Me and you are talking. You're in Ohio. I'm in Alberta. That's amazing. Like we have that kind of communication today. That's an amazing thing taken for granted. And I look at it honestly and go, it isn't so bad. I know. Now, I'd rather do this in person,
Of
but
course.
that's right. But I mean, again, we don't live in a perfect world, but we do live in a good one. Going back to what
Mm.
you're going the other way, it's things that go on all the time that no one talks about, and those good things. I don't know if they necessarily outweigh the bad, but they're just as present as the bad stuff is, at least. And you know, that's a good world to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely live in a world. I mean, my perspective is that there are equal parts good and evil in the world, and I think that there's a balance there.
Sure.
So call it yin yang, whatever you want. But I feel like uh, one of the things that I've enjoyed about my journey, especially the last 4 years, is to be able to open myself up to more perspective, to more introspection, and to try things that I have not tried before. I mean, the reason we started talking was this our third time talking, I think,
A
is
third or
because
fourth.
I set out and wrote a comic book, and I never done that before, and I really enjoyed that process, but I learned tons about myself, and accomplishing that thing set me on a trajectory that really changed my life. And so I don't know, I guess and now I'm become an advocate for it, like to the point where I want other people to have that experience of, you did something that maybe you didn't think you could do, or you've done something that maybe you haven't done before, and it created a new perspective that I don't know, made you more curious about the world, made you learn something about yourself, and that's exciting. It's exciting stuff.
So one of my favorite like poems, quotes, expressions of all time is our deepest fear.
Mm.
Our deepest fear isn't that we're weak; it's that we're powerful,
Mm.
right? And basically, the whole thing goes in the fact that it's our strength that terrifies us most,
Mm.
and that the world isn't done. Like we aren't done. We aren't meant to be small.
Mm.
We're
Yeah,
meant
I
to
agree
be.
with that.
Yeah, we aren't meant to be small. We are meant to be big. This idea of being small and being able to sit in a corner safe, that is not living. That is dying.
Mm.
Because in that comfort, the world shrinks and revolves, and slowly but surely it will devour you if you let it.
Right.
You have to go out into the world. You have to try. It doesn't matter what it is. You can compose that music, write that comic, write that novel, act that play, sing that song, whatever it is in your heart, you do it. And when you in the process of doing it, you will find yourself. And then one day you will wake up and you will realize. So when you start the journey, your biggest fear is being small.
Mm.
When you go deeper into the journey, you realize I'm smaller than I could possibly realize. But it no longer bothers you because you're no longer worried about how big you are in the world. You're more worried about how much more of the world there is to see and do and become. Life is change. Life is growth. Life is doing. Life is not waiting. Life is not stopping or pausing or any of those things. You have to go, and you have to go now. That is how it works. That is always how it works. It's always how it will work, right? You have to go now, and because again, there is no guarantees for tomorrow. This is it. This is what you got. This is what you got to do. This is it. Again, it's almost to a fault with me at this point. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but that's where I'm at. And like I said, there might come a day where I can't do it like I'm doing it now, and that's fine. And that's fine. I'll figure out another way to do it because why not?
No, I know that fear. I know there are times where I'm like, did I do enough production today to feel like I've taken advantage of the opportunities I've been given, right? Like, have I worked enough on my next story? Have I put enough time into writing something, music or story wise? Did I do enough preparation for the rehearsal that rehearsal is going to positively affect somebody, even on the smallest scale? And there have been days where I feel bad that I didn't, meet that quota, I guess you could say. Because I don't want to waste any time.
Well, okay, so let's go to the flip side. I like MMA, and one of my favorite interviews was Joe Rogan interviewed Michael Bisping, and I think it was interesting because Bisping said this: it takes a lot of confidence to take a day off, but there's a fine line. There's a very fine line because sometimes you need that day off. Sometimes you are legitimately.
Sure.
We could take a step back and go, "I'm good," and you can be. It's not a terrible deal.
Right.
One day. Maybe even two.
Well, listen, a broken tool is not going to get the job done. So you have to be in a spot where you're healthy and you're mentally in the right place.
Absolutely. But but there's a fine line, right? Because there's I'm taking a break because I'm good, and then I'm a lazy fucker. And there's a really right. And there. I mean, it's a fine line, right? Because again, we have this. Human beings are creatures of habit, but also creatures of momentum. We can sometimes you need a pause. And I'm not saying that, and I say this because if you are a creative listening or watching this, it's because yes, it is good to take a break sometimes. It is legit. Go do something else. Sometimes it's necessary to do something else.
Right. And that's where inspiration can come in too. If you're constantly consuming, constantly working, you're not opening yourself up to the random opportunity to get that idea, that puzzle piece that might put all your ideas together into a cohesive project,
Absolutely. No, and that's the thing. We need those moments. But we are creatures of momentum, right? So if I'm doing my thing and suddenly magically I stop doing my thing, it's really tempting to go, right? It's really tempting to not do my thing. It's really tempting to do other things. And then one day I wake up and it's like, oh shit, I've lost track.
Yeah.
I am totally not speaking from experience, by the way, at all. It happened, but it can happen, right? And so you got to be aware of what you're doing, how you're doing it, right? There's only so much time in the day. There's just only so much time in the day, and you have to be very again, this goes back to time consciousness ultimately. What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? And that's it, right? That's it. If you don't kind of have that mindset at least a little bit, you're never going to move forward.
I also think that there's room for different levels of production. So I have
Absolutely.
a trombone student who we were having this conversation the other day where they were saying, I have a lot of time to practice. And I said, do you understand that if you did 5 minutes of trombone practice, that's more than 0 minutes of trombone practice. And if you do 5 minutes, 5 days a week, that's 25 minutes of practice as opposed to 0 minutes of practice. So even if you feel like, oh, but it's only 5 minutes, what could I possibly accomplish in 5 minutes? Well, listen, all that little stuff adds up to a more significant amount of time in which you put yourself out there, learned a different skill, developed another habit, and there's power in that. And so to your point about resting, I agree, but I think that there's also, even when I'm on vacation, I'm thinking, is there something that I can do today that I can take back with me, to help with a project, whether that's taking a few minutes to just do a writing sample. Like, I'm just going to write for 20 minutes, and I don't even know if I'll ever use it, but at least I'm using that tool.
So I'll tell you a fun story. Back in my early 20s, I had 2 jobs. I would work, especially on weekends. I would work from 3 in the afternoon to 7 in the morning. Okay. So there would be, for those 3 days, were pretty much washed. They're washed in terms of my time. When I got home, I would spend 15 minutes writing. I was working on a novel. I would write the novel for 15 minutes. That's it. 15. No more, no less. And what I realized was, okay, yeah, sure, it's not a lot of progress, but it's still progress. And the whole lesson I learned there is, and it's a lesson that didn't really fully sink in for another like 10 years. You always have time. Whether you realize it or not, you always have time. You have to make it work sometimes. Like, again, we all have at different points of our life too. We have different responsibilities. When your kids were very young, right? That, like, they required a lot more of your time. So guess what? You were doing that stuff because that was the priority, and rightfully so. But it still didn't mean that you didn't have 20 or 30 minutes here and there.
Oh no, I wrote most of Peerless right after my daughter was born, my youngest was born, and that's because I would get up, like, okay, so we had weird hours. I was helping with changing diapers and giving bottles and things like that, and trying to be as helpful to my wife as I could. And so there were times where maybe I got up at an awkward time, and I'm like, ugh, I'm just gonna have to go back. If I go back to sleep now, I'm going to be up in 30 minutes to go take a shower and get ready for work. So I would go downstairs and work on Peerless for 30 minutes. Or if it was nap time, I would be like, all right, this is my writing time. And then eventually I got to the point where I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning so that I could get ready and go write for an hour and then get ready for work and help everybody get situated. Yeah. So even in probably, one of the most busy times of my life where I had the least amount of free time, I still worked to make time to get work done, and it worked. I mean, I have a finished book. Actually, I have 8 issues that are finished that are just not published yet. So,
but that's again, that's my point perfectly, like, summed up. Is you, like, what ends up happening is if you dedicate time, even just let's say just 5 minutes, eventually that 5 minutes will become 15.
Right.
That 15 will become 30. That 30 will become an hour. That's just how life works. What you do ends up becoming your pattern. And if it's something you really want to do, if the mindset's there to do it, you will suddenly have all kinds of time and place, and it will happen. We need pressure as a species. We're all guilty of this, getting comfortable and sitting on our asses standing still. And we all have that a little bit in us. And listen, we need that sometimes. Like, I'm not going to completely poo-poo that, but be aware that staying in that spot comes with a price tag if you stay in it too long.
Right.
Because that becomes your focus. And once that becomes your focus, If your focus is doing nothing, you end up doing exactly that. If your focus is, I'm going to take 5 minutes to write a story, even if it takes, again, this is the beautiful thing about life is it's not a race. It's not. It's a marathon, and there are points when you can go. You're going to have all the time in the world. There are points you have very little time in the world, but in all those points, you can do stuff, and it really doesn't matter in like the best way. If that makes sense.
It does. We should teach everybody how to be organized, because ultimately that's it, right? Like it's taking those little moments and organizing them all into the project so that you can make it all together, put it all together.
A football player said it once: discipline or despair. The choice is yours. You need to discipline yourself. I think the thing is, you have to make, if you decide to go down an artistic path, an athletic path, any path actually, doesn't matter. It requires a degree of discipline. It just does. You have to work on your craft. You have to put the time in. Like I've done 961 podcasts, right? They still don't come out exactly right after all these years. They never do. But I know a lot about how to put a show together. I have my own ideas on how to do it, and that comes with, like, okay, just think of it like this. I have put at least 900 hours into this show. Like, think about that, right? Yeah. At least 900, probably closer to 2,700 hours of my life into the show. Right?
At least a quarter of that has been our conversations alone. So I mean,
exactly. But I mean, what I'm saying to people is I've disciplined myself to make this happen. I didn't when I started. They were half hour to an hour episodes. Now they're an hour to 2 hour episodes. And I'm doing most weeks, multiple. And I could keep doing it this way if I wanted to for as long as I wanted to. But I've done 500 of this version. So I want to do something else because I can't. I think the most important thing I've said here is my 8th rule: stay uncomfortable. You got to keep yourself changing, or you just don't, right? And that you stay in the exact same spot. It's when you try and do different things that new possibilities open up. Again, get good at your craft, work on it, master it, and then be like, okay, let's see if I can take it to the next level. Right?
Never think you've got it figured out. Never, ever. Always keep exploring.
That's right. And that's a process. That's a discipline. That's what you're really teaching, what you're really giving people as a teacher when you're a music teacher. Confidence and discipline, in that order. You're teaching students it is possible to truly create beautiful things from within, which is, I think, an amazing gift. But you're also teaching them this basic structure of how to achieve anything in life, because the only way you make that music is if you practice. And that practice, even if it's just 5 minutes, can go a long way in life. The biggest lie you take away from a student, and this is something that took me till my 30s to figure out, is that you don't have time. It's the biggest lie you tell people. You do have time. Now, you may always have, you may have other priorities at points, but you always have time.
Right. Can we get T-shirts made?
Possibly.
Sponsored by Just Joshing.
Yeah.
You always have time.
I'm doing a freelance mindset when words collide on the 7th of August, and biggest thing that is, I'm going to use my 12 rules as a guidepost to how to actually have a mindset of a freelancer. And I'm doing it like my first rule, and every time I sometimes think this is the dumbest rule I've ever come up with, but it's also like the most accurate: show up. I feel like an idiot every time, but it's like, it's the truth. That's the difference between success and failure more often than not.
Very true. Very true. Sometimes you just got to get it. You got to do it.
That's it. That's it. That's all it is. And sometimes you're like, it's this simple. Why is it this simple? And why does nobody do it? Right. So, but it's, like I said, creativity, success, work, whatever your goals are, they're a process. By the way, my dad hates when I say, because he tries to go to me when he with his business, I don't have time. It's like, yeah, you do. And he goes, oh, shut the fuck up. Right? Because he hates it, because he can't really argue against what I'm saying. He's like, I'm busy all the time. It's like, Dad, if you really wanted to, you could just hire somebody. But then I gotta train. It's like, yes, but you'll save time in the long run if you do that.
Right.
Doesn't want to hear that, right? So it's just like, okay, just keep doing it, right? But again, we all have to make. And I guess this is the final thing I'll say about this. It's about what you want at the end of the day. That's it. It's really about what you want, and as long as you're honest about it, that's the important thing. Be honest about what you want and what you want to get out of what you're doing. If you're honest enough about it, right, you can make it happen, right? If you're dishonest with yourself, you're still serving a want, but very often now you'll just get in your own way. I think that's that honesty, that clarity is important for anybody in any aspect of life, because with that honesty, with that clarity, you'll find with that honesty and that clarity, you'll find, you will find your path. If you're dishonest with yourself, you still might have that path, but now you have to fight you, and that sucks.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I think with honesty and clarity, you discover, and I just that you discover, like you by being honest with yourself and being clear about your intentions. I think that you put yourself in a position to learn new things, to meet new people, and that's part of discovery.
Absolutely.
And I think I've been thinking about a long time, like, where does creativity come from? I remember when I was first starting as a songwriter, I would ask other songwriters, like, how do you write songs? And I think I naively thought that they had like a system. And what I learned over years is that, like, songs come to me in multiple different ways. There's no one single way that a song comes to me. It is absolutely from a multitude of ways of being inspired. Writing is the same way. I'm developing a new story right now, and I'm in the exploratory stage. And I come across like different aspects of the story that I want to tell, that I'm like, I need to do some research on that because I want to understand that better. And inevitably, in those explorations, I learn something else, but another part of the story, or get another idea about another part of the story that I didn't even intend to or had thought of previously. And that's simply because I just went out there and was curious about it, and was, looking for inspiration, or allowing inspiration to happen. And it's interesting how creativity works. It is a strange thing, but also magical.
So I've said this on a few podcasts since. I got a confession to make to you since we last talked. I became a Taylor Swift fan.
A Taylor Swift fan?
Yeah.
My daughter loves Taylor Swift. She's a huge Taylor Swift fan.
Yeah. So I'm okay. So I stumbled onto Taylor Swift with Folklore, like during the like I got it for like, it came to me for like nothing, and your daughter might be jealous of this. I actually, in my storage locker, I found her first album. I actually had bought it on a whim years ago. So I'm like, my God, I have her first album. You can't find it anywhere.
Right.
So it's like, so I had it. But what I did was, in listening to Folklore, it was the first time I really listened to her. And what I realized with her was it's not what she sings about. I think this is the thing about creativity that took me a real long time to really understand. It's not what she sings about so much. She sings love songs. Love songs might be the most competitive part of the music industry, honestly. I mean, just look at what else is there. Ariana Grande is there. You have what's her name? Miley Cyrus is there. You have Avril Lavigne there. Like, you have some pretty big names in music, and that's all they sing are love songs. And it's a hyper competitive field. So how do some artists succeed and others don't? And I listen to Swift, I understand. It's not what she sings about. It's the parts of herself she puts into the songs that make it work. There's an authentic, like, she's a great storyteller technically. I'm not saying that isn't part of it. She's really worked on her craft, but she gives a shit. You can listen to her music and you can hear it. She gives the thing about a good story, a good song, a good performance. It's the part of you that you care about in the story that's going to make or break the story.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I also think that's what makes every story, no matter if it's a love song or if it's a fantasy novel, it makes every author, every creator's story unique, because you can use the same scene, the same emotions, but the fact of the matter is that Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande have had two completely different lives. And so their experiences of love are going to be different. And that
Absolutely.
means that even though they're both writing about love, those songs, while about the topic, are two different people's perspectives on it.
Absolutely. And that's, I think the important thing about that is you got to understand where, yeah, where both of them are in their lives. It's part of it, but it's also just the parts that they think are important to tell too,
Absolutely, yeah.
right. The parts they think that are important to tell. I think certain I'm not criticizing anybody. I think that certain things, and when you look at some of the more manufactured aspects of the music industry, the reason why they can become a hit short term is because there's a certain poppiness to it that, like, they're like, people can remember, like, the earworm aspect to it, but songs that really stand the test of time, right, are, there are still songs that are played on the radio that were played on the radio when I was a kid. Right, yeah, some of it's because the guys in charge are old people that love those songs. I mean, that's part of it.
Sure.
But why do they love those songs?
Yeah.
It's because of the people there, of the people doing the work, the music, the whatever, right? It is very much about the fact that there was that genuineness in the music. The Beatles had, like, as it might arguably be the greatest modern band of all time. I'm not gonna say that right, might, or well, modern, I guess, because the '60s was, almost 50 years ago, but 60 years ago. Holy shit, time does fly, right? But the thing is, they brought a sound that was uniquely them. Go to Nirvana in the '90s, they brought a sound that was uniquely them. You look at Eminem, he brought a sound that was uniquely his. You look at Taylor Swift, brings a sound that's uniquely hers. And that's the whole thing about the art scene is, if you look at comics, it's the same thing, right? Yeah, comics are a lot more commercial, like especially superhero books, but the best stuff is often, you can tell what a Grant Morrison book is.
Sure.
Just reading it, you just know it's Grant Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
You know it's J. Michael Straczynski when you read a J. Michael Straczynski book. You know it's Marv Wolfman because it's Marv Wolfman, and Gail C. Moon because it's Gail C. Moon. There is a particular feeling, song, title, touch that's just uniquely them, and that's why people seek them out.
I totally agree with you. And the interesting thing about straddling worlds of, being a writer of comic books, but then also being a musician, is that I see those parallels firsthand when you talk to people, and I've had some interesting opportunities to work with very successful musicians who've achieved levels of exposure that I could only hope to achieve. And it's one really interesting thing that I wish every human who enjoys pop culture could see, is that behind the scenes, the insecurities that those folks have, the experiences they have, are a lot more in common and than with what we've experienced than we think. Um, I I've worked with musicians who um, wrote music that blew up 40 years ago, and they still have insecurities about playing it and what the song's about, or sections of songs that they don't feel like live up to it. And it's a proven hit, man. It's been around for 40 years. It's been a huge hit. It's so fascinating. Even productions. I love the show. Is it Movies We Love? It's on Netflix, because what that show reveals is, like, we put these movies that we love on a pedestal, I think Aliens was one, and they had built the Queen Alien, but like the first version was like weird pieces of plastic, and there's like garbage bags like holding the parts together, and they're trying to do the puppetry work with it. It looks it looks like something that high school kids would do in their basement to try to make an alien. But like that's part of the process. I'm getting ready to do a Nightmare Before Christmas anniversary show. Huge parts of that film were made in someone's garage. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Like nobody
Yeah. No.
sees that. They think Hollywood. They think red carpets and fancy dresses and all that kind of stuff. But when you go behind the scenes, it's a lot of people just figuring it out to make it work.
A lot of it's problem solving. Like
Yeah.
honestly, a lot of it is just, especially like I've been on movie sets, right? Movie sets are like one part warehousing, one part creativity. That's how. That's how. No, seriously, like you go behind the scenes of the guts of a set. It's as seriously if you look at a television production. So while one scene's going on, a whole crew is building a set,
Right.
or taking down a set,
Mm-hmm.
right? Depending on the situation. So one crew's taking down a set, another crew's building a set. The whole goal is to get to a point where once the set's built, the actors can go from one scene to the next, to the next, to the next.
Right.
So a lot of times you're gonna see you'll see stuff on screen and you're like, that's cool. But it's literally sometimes jury rigged. Sometimes there's all kinds of problems. Like, okay, Vancouver, it rains a lot. Like, I mean, it rains twice a year there, January to June,
Right.
July to December. I mean, that's how much it rains there. And so you got to figure out, like, you're solving problems, you're dealing with issues, you're dealing with, and this is just common shit, right? It's just common as bullshit. And it's like, but somewhere in that whole process, because of the right crew, the right actors, the right people, it just meshes into something amazing.
Well, that was my next point. So
Yeah.
you go in and you see these productions and you think, yeah, I think we have an idea of like, oh my gosh, like they've spent all this money and put it all together, and yet it's still just people trying to make it work.
Yeah.
And I think the difference between two really well written songs where one maybe reaches a high level of exposure, lots of people listen to it, it's a pop sensation, and one that is equally as well crafted but does not reach that level, is that you do reach a tipping point at some point where like once you pass that point, it goes into mass exposure and it becomes a phenomenon. Lizzo was just in Cleveland a couple weeks ago, and she went to a local taco stand that those of us who live in the area, like, we know they have great tacos. But she went there and she had the vegetarian tacos and took her little Twitter video and posted that. And now, like, this restaurant is being bombarded with attention and stuff like that, right? Like, they're making the same tacos. We here all know the tacos are great, but maybe this is their tipping point where like just that one situation that was really out of their control set them on a path that was unexpected, and maybe they become more successful as a result. It's the whole pop culture thing to me is fascinating because often it's not about the quality of the work, it's about something, the circumstances surrounding the creation that propels it to stardom, fame, popularity, so on and so forth.
So I've had really successful people on the show. I've had people that are just getting started, people like us are kind of just figuring our way out. Mm-hmm. So I've talked to the really successful people. Like they'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you. They have no idea how they have no idea. It's not a result that can be controlled, especially the first time. Because like this is gonna sound like really corny. The one-time success can completely happen by accident. Mm-hmm. Right? There's like again, Lizzo went to the taco place. That's an accident. Okay, right. That's an accident. You don't have any say, control, whatever the case may be. However, it's what the taco place does with it from here.
Right.
That's right. Okay, you got this moment. What do you do with it? Mm-hmm. Right? Do you let that moment pass you by? Because there's going to come a point where the fad will disappear. Right. On the other hand, maybe if this, again, this also, there's a combination of things. It's also about what the taco place wants to. And I need to say that up front. Might just be happy being a solitary taco stand. Right.
Yep.
Right. And again, nothing wrong with that. But let's just say, like, okay, they've hit this unparalleled success. They want to maintain it. Well, how would they do that? Well, they could open up another store right now. Hit it in another really cool area. Right, do some research, figure out a really fun location. So, what are the where can we go to increase the odds of something like this happening again? This is just one approach. This isn't the only approach. This is just one approach. But in that moment of success, there's also an opportunity to propel yourself somewhere higher or to maintain it. I look at people who constantly, okay, I interviewed Marissa Mayer on the show. Right, I'm a big fan of her after talking to her for, well, first off, putting up with the one show that literally has me and a doppelganger show up, and there's an actual, it's going up on YouTube in a few days, in about a week. It's actually, no, it's up. It's me, Marissa Mayer, and my doppelganger. You can look up on the YouTube channel. Literally, StreamYard glitched. It was a glitch of StreamYard I've never seen before. Right, but I was having all kinds of problems getting on, and it was just one of those moments where it was just like, what the hell, right? But at the same time, like this is the other aspect to it, right? She has Cinder became a big sensation. She had no control. Like, it's just one of those things where she put it out there. It went really, really well. But she's also done like 10 books that have been New York Times, top 10 New York Times, quite a few of them #1 New York Times bestsellers. Right. So there comes a point in that situation where you got to look at her and go, okay, you figured your shit out. Right. And so going back to your musician friend that's always insecure about that hit, there's two thought processes about it. They might be insecure about the hit because also the thing is they wrote that song 40 years ago. They don't feel about that song the way they did 40 years ago. And I think probably the hardest thing for a musician playing their hits after years and years and years is, okay, even if a song you played 5 years ago versus a song you play now, you don't feel the same way about that song 5 years ago. You don't, because you've become a different person. Right. So if that's the case, you're like, okay, what can I bring to the song now that either I couldn't then, or at least can still make it where I feel like I can play it well. Because I imagine after 40 years, in some of those cases, that's a difficult challenge. It's like, how can I do that? At the same time, here's the flip side to that argument, right? The flip side, okay? There was something special about even all these flaws you see. There was something special about it because, as you pointed out to them, it's a fucking hit. Right. There's a reason it touches people, and that in the emotions, who you were then. I've told this to a couple artists. Who you were then, there was something about that resonated with people. Right. Even though technically you could do it better today, and yes, you could probably, you couldn't feel what you felt then. Right. And maybe you shouldn't worry about it. I would give that artist this advice: worry how to make it fun for you instead. Right? Make it because I know you're kind of doing some fan service there in the sense of the song is about as much the people listening to it as you playing it. But at the same time, there's always ways you can make it fun. Like I heard, I listened last night to a Placebo cover of Running Up That Hill. That is such a haunting version of that song. Such a haunting version of that song. But then I listened to him perform it live. He took it to another. It's still that same haunting bass. But man, that last 2 minutes of that song, he just went to another level. He found a piece of it that was his. In that last 2 minutes, that's what he brings out.
You know, some of my favorite musicians are really good at that, and that they can take a song that they wrote a long time ago, and then whether it's the combination of musicians that they're working with when they're playing live, or if it's as far as like we're going to do an orchestral version of it that we've never done before. It's really interesting to me to see them breathe new life into a song. Peter Gabriel's the first example that comes to mind for me. His album New Blood is really fascinating because they took his hits and they had an orchestrator write for orchestra. Those songs don't sound like the same songs they were when he originally released them, and it's really fresh and new and interesting. And then he can't tour with an orchestra forever, so he's getting ready to do a tour this summer. But the musicians he's going to have playing on that tour are going to bring their own input and their own experience, and I feel like Peter Gabriel's the type of musician that's open to being like, yeah, if you hear that and it works, let's do it.
Yeah.
That's another cool aspect of the idea of that you can take something that you've written and you can continue to explore it in different ways.
Absolutely.
And it continues to grow and develop into new things. It's interesting. It's very interesting to me.
Well, that's the thing, right? Especially, okay, look what I'm doing with the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to change. I don't have to change it. It works, but I want to change it.
Yeah,
because I feel like I can take the concept I've built and add something different to it. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not like I'm bored with bored. I think it's the wrong word. I don't want to be complacent in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And with Peter Gabriel, same thing. Again, you do this long enough, you see all these different ways of doing things, right? You can't knock a hit,
right?
But you can go, okay, I need this to be different for me. So when I go back to that hit, right, that new thing. My favorite Linkin Park album is my favorite is they did one of my favorite concept albums of all time, 1,000 Suns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 1,000 Suns is not their best album, right? It's not. It's a good album. I don't think it's a bad album, but it's not the typical Linkin Park formula.
Mm-hmm.
They went out of their comfort zone. Then they went back. My favorite album is the one they did afterward, Living Things.
Mm.
Because 1,000 Suns reinvigorated them.
Yeah.
Living Things is awesome. Start track 1 to the end. It is my opinion, their best work. It's right because they were on. Like they took what they learned from 1,000 Suns and made it. They made their original sound theirs in a way they hadn't before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because when you go back now, it's like when I draw and when I go to my writing, right? That tool is there now. I see it differently. I do it differently.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So that's the thing. Like from a craft standpoint, the idea, the raw emotion of the idea in the beginning is probably the most special thing about the idea.
Oh, that's a really good thing. And I really want to jump on that. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
That's really interesting for you to say. So I had an opportunity late last year to work with Night Ranger, Sister Christian, and they hired me to write arrangements for a bunch of their songs. And then we did a concert with them in November with the orchestra playing along. And as the arranger, and also knowing just kind of the specs on the project, I knew that there wasn't going to be a lot of time to drastically change the songs because we only had a couple rehearsals before the performance. So I had to keep pretty close to the originals, or at least the way that they were performing them live as they're on the road now. So I would get live recordings of their performances, and then I would write around those performances. And the interesting thing, and the point that you just made, is that my biggest challenge was trying to understand what their story was in each one of those songs, because that's the core, right? Like that is the core essence of what I'm writing to, is understanding that story and then hopefully contributing to that story without drastically changing the story. And the thing is like that's the important thing to consider because the fans of Night Ranger have been listening to those songs for a long time, and they want to hear it a certain way. What I set out to do was to say, but here's a little extra sparkle on top of that to give you an added experience that doesn't completely change your connection to it, but adds just a little bit more to it. And it was a really cool experience because those guys have been playing those songs for a really long time. And to see them, the first time they came to rehearsal, they are hearing the orchestra. It's the first time they've worked with an orchestra. And it was really fascinating to watch their reaction to hearing songs that they've been playing for such a long time, presented in a slightly different way. And it was awesome to be a part of as a storyteller because it was taking somebody's story and just adding to the story a little bit rather than trying to rewrite it. And it was a fascinating project to be a part of.
Because just going down what I was going to say anyway, it was that original idea is
right.
is where it all starts and ends.
Yep.
Now the original point I was going to make is a musician's been doing it for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is going to want to take that story and try and see where they can go with it as many different ways as possible. Because ultimately, music and storytelling are not that different, right? So
yeah,
right. So it's not only understanding in that particular case, it wasn't just understanding the story they were telling, right? It was also what can I bring to it that's mine.
Right.
Because again, you're not going to change the story very much. So what can you give it other than what do you care about it? Right? Where does it speak to you? All right, can you do something that's so, okay, Marilyn Manson's Beautiful People is one of the most iconic covers of all time, right? And the reason why is because he took a song that's very not that metal and made it something very different. Very different. Metal. That was that. Right. But I think my all-time favorite reimagining of a song is ironically John Lennon's Imagine, Perfect Circle. Their version's haunting as fuck. It's the same key, same tone, like just the tone's different, but they brought an emotional ominence to that song. Right. And it was fascinating to listen to. But that's just it. You can tell a story a myriad of different ways. What's going to click with people is the way you tell it. And understanding how you tell it and what you care about. And ironically, when figuring out what you care about, figuring out who you are might be the most important part of the artistic journey.
Isn't storytelling fun? I mean, there's just so many different ways to tell stories and to explore storytelling. And
absolutely.
It's great. I love it.
It is. No, that's the whole of it. I think the biggest lesson I would tell anybody telling a story is, what do you care about in that story? Focus on that.
Right.
That's your story. Yep. Don't argue with it. Tell it. Right. Don't try to be anything else. It could be as tropist as you want. It doesn't matter. Right. What matters is you care. Because if you care, people will find it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Mr. Kris, this has been fun. We ain't doing this like this again, though. Isn't that kind of sad?
No, it's not sad because you're going to be here or I'm going to be in Canada and we're going to have some kind of amazing place where we're going to meet in person and have a conversation while sitting across from each other. And it's going to be incredible.
It's going to be in Ohio, probably, because I'll be there. I'll be in some kind of automobile of some kind. All my possessions in there. You might hear, like, again, you might hear some Taylor Swift, or you might hear some Jars of Clay, or you might hear some, or maybe Amon Amarth. Like I go all over the place with my music taste, and you just see it's like, oh, it's Josh. Guy in the person. Yeah, he is. Why has he got all these people after him and it's saying something about ice cream?
Right.
Maybe I don't want to know. But
well, we'll have you out, and I'll introduce you to the orchestra, and you'll have to come
cool.
out and see our stage and everything. It'll be fun.
Yeah, it totally would be. I would love that. That sounds like a great promise. But if until that moment comes, buddy, it's been a pleasure to get to know you.
Yeah, man, it's been great. It's been great, and I've enjoyed this conversation as much as I've enjoyed all of our previous conversations. And I will say this, as I've said, I think every previous interview, I look forward to the next time we get to talk, because it's always exciting.
Yeah. So we got to do this properly, sir. You got to tell people where people can find you, or you've got a project that's out and about. Where is that project?
So you can find me at skinnykmusic.com. That's SKINNYK music.com. And on the website there, you'll find all of my creations. So you can purchase Peerless there, or you can purchase Shady Lane Blues there. And then also, if you're interested in the musical stuff that I'm doing, you can find me on YouTube. I've got a channel there. I did a 10-episode thing called Score Sessions, where I rescored scenes from movies based on listener suggestions. That was a great experiment. And then also, please check out the Contemporary Youth Orchestra here in Cleveland. That's cyorchestra.org. And we are just about to finish our season. We're doing a production of Queen musical We Will Rock You in coordination with Cuyahoga Community College, which is going to be really exciting. And then in the fall, when we restart up, we'll be putting together a 30th anniversary concert of Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. I did a 10-year concert. I did a 20-year concert. And now I'm doing a 30-year concert. So this is 30 years in the making. And I'm extremely excited about what we have planned. It's going to be a great show.
So I got this distracted. So skinnykmusic.com?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, there you go. Hold on. They gave me awards for this, Kris. They gave me awards for this. So there's that. There's that. And Lord of Lions. Hey, man. If you want to go after doing a Lord of the Rings concept, go nuts. Just make it yours. Make it yours. Yep. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is this conversation. Before I go, I should mention this right here, right now. I got two things to advertise, because I'm a freelancer and stuff, and I'm trying to make my zillions and zillions of dollars. I have already started doing post 1,000 episodes of Just Josh, and you can go on my patreon.com/Just Joshing podcast. Not that one. That one. See, award winner right there, ladies and gentlemen. Right. So go here. You can actually pay $5 and you can get access to all the shows that are being done. My second episode just dropped with Mark Watson. My third episode drops in about a week and a half. I'm going to try to keep them on a relatively the schedule, at least until I'm on the road. And when I'm on the road, I'll actually, become a professional at it and stuff. And when I'm not doing this show so much anymore, I'm doing that show fully. It'll be that. Beyond that, folks, I do advertising services. I make videos, audios, words, and pictures about your projects and yourselves. If you want to definitely take a look at that, I will definitely help you. One day we'll have to do a conversation about, ironically, how raising my prices got me more business. It's an interesting conversation. That all said, folks, this is Kris Morron. You should check out his comics at some point. Peerless is still awesome. You got to do issue 2 at some point sooner than later, buddy. Yeah, right. But beyond all that, folks, this has been Just Joshing. Thanks for watching or listening, however you did this. Stay inspired, keep shining in the dark, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody.